in Kashmir Shaivism, and it has its own discourse, whereby we get all kinds of siddhantas and doctrines and concepts. But it is interesting to see the analytical approach that has been adopted by the Westerners also, and especially contemporary school of thoughts, which are trying to, unveil the concept of creativity. So I assume that we all, as students of philosophy, are familiar with major concerns of aesthetics. It could be the concept of beauty. It could be concept of uh, it could be concept of sublime when it comes to Kant. But there are other certain issues which, in the present context, I wish to bring upon and highlight for your concern. That uh, is creativity something which is very mystical in nature? Can we have a rational discourse on creativity? Can we formulate certain rules, and thereby abiding them, we come to, an artwork? Can we have a rational discourse on creativity? Can we also think of uh, certain processes which are logical priorities towards creative process? Is there any particular definition of creative person, or it is only after having created the object then we can claim that yes, so and so is creative enough? So these are the fundamental questions which bother me as a student of philosophy. And of course, the entire concept of art, aesthetic experience. Let me just briefly give one uh, demarcation, that art and aesthetics. That when we talk of aesthetics, we are practically trying to understand the theories of art, the definitions of art that are philosophically interpreted in aesthetics as a domain of philosophy, as a discipline of philosophy. So when we look into the definition of this art and art experience that we call aesthetic experience, we find that in Bharatiya Tattva Mimamsa, we find that rasa is equated with Brahma, right? Or we have a similar pedestal. On similar pedestal, we find that the concept of rasa is treated, equated with Brahman. And the source for this is that Sahitya Darpan, when it claims Sattvodreka the Khanda Swaprakashanam Chinmaya Vedyantara Sparsha Shunyo Brahmananda Swada Sahodara. So now this concept of ras is equated with Brahman on certain grounds which are clearly mentioned in the verse, whereby it is believed that first of all it sprouts out from sattva, out of the three gunas. It is believed that it emerges out of sattva, not rajas, not tamas. That means sattva must be having some elements, some normative elements, some enlightening elements, which leads a normal emotive state of mind to a state of rasa. So sattva has that potential, whereby which is common to Brahmanubhuti as well as Rasanubhuti. And secondly, not only this, it is akhanda. Akhanda, that there is no hindrance, there is no interruption in it. It is unified experience. It is a holistic experience. It is a total experience. Nothing else, adding anything else to it will not perform any extra function. It is a complete whole. So that means nothing else, no element is left out. It is complete in itself. The experience is complete in itself. And thirdly, it is swaprakasha. It is swaprakash. Swaprakash, it is, that means it is self-illuminating. And self-illuminating means that it needs no other proof other than itself, that yes, it is happening to you. It is occurring within you. You are realizing it. You are feeling it. That is evident. It is self-evident. And Anand, of course, it is joyful. It is blissful. I'm not sure if we can use the word blissful, but yes, it is certainly joyful. and Chinmaya. It is not that we have been, under sedation that it happens to us. We willfully, com- we we are not ignorant of what is happening to us. We are completely in the know of the things. We are under the control of the situation, and hence we realize it. It is a voluntary experience, and not it is not something which unconsciously happens, and hence it contains the element of consciousness. And not only this, it also it and on the basis of this, it is believed that while you are undergoing this experience, there is no other experience which touches you, which intervenes, which disturbs. And that is how it is so unified, and that is how it is so engrossing and encompassing that fail to recognize any other. And that is how we forget ourselves. The fundamental principle of sadharanikaran also is this, that we identify, we transcend ourselves, what we are actually. you know we forget when we are in the theater that I am so and so. I rather assume an identity which is given to me on that screen or on the stage, on in the theater. So I not only forget myself, rather I assume another identity. I get into the skin of the character which is in front of me, and hence I transcend myself. So with this, I would like to read a few passages that I've written so that I do not digress from the topic. And also, uh, all right. So the moot point is this, that if the form of transcendence correctly represents the case of self transcendence here in aesthetic experience or not, a state whereby an empirical self moves away from one form of conditional existence to another. Why? Because in aesthetic experience, there is certainly a hanging. I hang on to some one form to another form. This is merely transformation of myself. Why? Because I was earlier so and so, and now I have another empirical identification with so and so, and that is how I am hanging on, moving from one form of conditional identity to another form of conditional identity. So, shall we call it self transcendence, or will it be known as merely self transformation? That is one of the concerns of aesthetes in the circle. And it is also the self still hangs on to something among different forms of samadhi. Now we get references from Yoga Sutra that there are forms of samadhi: savitark, savichar, sanand, sasmit. These are the forms of transformation, transcendence. These are the states of transcendence, rather, whereby we can endorse that yes, there is a possibility while we are in the state of aesthetic experience, we may be hanging on to some another idea which is now different, but still it can be considered as a form of transcendence. So it is not all that easy to dislocate or or to destabilize the position, the magnanimous position of the concept of rasa that has been allocated by the tradition. And from yet another perspective, if we see the problem may be put forth here as follows. It is believed that aesthetics is an extended domain of ethics, since its concerns are normative in nature. For example, concept of beauty, sublime, uh, and then of course symmetry, harmony, balance, form, content. All these are normative concepts. So, from Indian perspective too, rasa is said to be an outcome of sattva. And this sattva, out of rajas, tamas, sattva is said to be the spring source of uh, this aesthetic experience, whereby we unite with the given object, given character, given thought. And this enlightening feature and this enlightenment, the characteristic of enlightenment, formulate the nature of sattva and thereby that of the rasa too. Needless to mention that the base for transcendence is sattva, and hence, however, the possibility of the experience of transcendence in the state of rasa cannot be altogether denied or questioned. Uh, to extend the argument further, we can also ask if transcendence in the aesthetic experience is more of transformation, if it is a transformative act of the self. Is it that since the spectator or audience is overwhelmed in their experience, overwhelmed with joy, with sorrow, it could be anything, and in their response to an aesthetic experience and feels truly transformed because of the sattva element in it and hence feel transcended from the usual and the regular self or the empirical self. The other way around could it also be that after realizing the spark of transcendental self, the resultant is the transformed self. The point that I wish to make here or to bring to your notice is कि पहले हमारे में सत्वोद्रेक होता है, फिर हम ट्रांसफॉर्म करते हैं, फिर हम ट्रांसेंड करते हैं, and then we feel that yes, now this is my new transformed self. Is this the hierarchy, or it is the other way around, that I transcend first and then I find transformed self? This is the concern out here. So, the possible answer to this question could be that on being charged by the anubhavas and the vibhavas and vyabhichari bhavas, the sattva is impacted and transformed, and it transforms the self or prepares the self to merge into a still higher state of joy or rasa or a state of transcendence. And after the experience, the self again realizes a transformation. The experience leaves the self impacted, touched, reformed, and transformed. Hence, it can be concluded safely that aesthetic experience does contain an element of self transcendence in some form. And we do have Arthur Koestler, who calls that art is a school of self transcendence, and number of scholars narrate their non-dualistic experiences. Some name them as nirvanic, some name them as pneumonic and numinous, religious, oceanic. Freud calls it oceanic, ecstatic, and fusion of the artist and the work, or overcoming or dissolving or transcending the binary opposites of the subjective and the objective is the core concern of this self transcendence mode in aesthetic experience. When the sharp difference or distinction between the object and the subject, self and the other, is lost, it is undone. Probably this is the stage whereby we can possibly think of and establish the validity of self transcendence in aesthetic experience. Arthur Danto also writes that high moments of artistic work, when artist and work are not separated by any gap, but fuse in such a way that the work seems to bring itself into existence. British composer Alexander Goher, the music, he also writes, the music writes itself. Now, this is a very big statement. The music writes itself. There is no longer a composer who pushes the material to become something. Rather, the composer becomes a servant. He becomes mere servant to the content that he has. And certainly, coming to the next concern of the presentation, we have the nature of art, the concerns of art, the relation between art and creative impulse. And if this creative impulse is a prerequisite for self transcendence in art or art activity, it is pertinent to mention here that when the concept of art is perceived in Indian tradition or Indian context, it is different, as Professor Sachidanandji was also referring to, that when we talk of art in the context of Indian tradition, we have only two paramparas, that is Kavya and Natya. We do not classify like Hegel would classify architecture, right from architecture, sculpture, painting, and then moving on to poetry. और अगर आप ध्यान से इनके contents को देखिए, you'll realize the content is grosser at the architecture level. The form of art that is followed in architecture needs lot of matter, needs lot of gross matter, mundane matter. कितना कुछ चाहिए हमें आर्किटेक्चर में. But as you grow higher on the hierarchy, म्यूजिक पे जाकर आपको कुछ भी नहीं चाहिए, केवल एक शब्द चाहिए. शब्द भी नहीं चाहिए वहां की सिम्फनीज के कंटेक्स्ट में, केवल आपको स्वर चाहिए. सिम्फनीज में कहीं शब्द नहीं होते, केवल वहां स्वर ही मिलते हैं. उससे नीचे आएंगे पोइट्री पे तो केवल शब्द और अर्थ. उससे नीचे आएंगे पेंटिंग, कलर्स, ब्रश, और आपको एक बड़ा सा जिसके ऊपर आप वो पेंट करेंगे, है ना. और उससे भी नीचे आएंगे स्कल्पचर, वहां पे उससे थोड़ा ज्यादा आपको मटेरियल चाहिए. सो देर इज अ हायरार्की. बट so far Indian context is concerned, you have only two traditions, the Kavya Parampara and the Natya Parampara. All of the skills, all of other forms of arts, they fall into these categories. नाट्य शास्त्र के अंदर आपकी मैक्सिमम कलाएं कवर हो जाती हैं, राइट फ्रॉम हेयर ड्रेसिंग टू स्टेज सेटिंग, राइट फ्रॉम यू नो dress codes and makeup and so many other things. They all fall under Natya Shastra. So the concern here is that when art is perceived in the West, there is a difference. Art in as a tradition has been visualized in Indian tradition, has been visualized in terms of Natya. you are actually assuming something to be done, and you have a blueprint how to reach there. You have a execution plan, and that is how art differs from this. Art is not a skill whereby, or a craft whereby you have a pre-planned image of the, or the blueprint of the working style. Hence, making is always teleological. It has a purpose. When you make something, if chair now, and hence making may have pragmatic utility also, but it is not utility, utilitarian purpose. We cannot, add up to an artwork. So, where art and making a painting of a pot, the two have different function. Making a pot means I might use it for my kitchen, but making a painting of a pot may have a different function and not utility. So, fourth, to take means to an end, one must know the end first. It is an execution which may be repeated, and hence making generally have rules, whereas an art product comes on its own, and hence you cannot have rules for it. As Vincent Thomas would also say, to create is to originate. Prior to creation, the creator does not foresee what will the result outcome will it be from. Otherwise, he would have to have the idea of it in the mind. But if he already had in mind, all that would remain to be done is to objectify the idea. अगर आर्टिस्ट के मन में पहले से ही विचार आ चुका है कि मुझे ये करना है, तो फिर तो सिर्फ उसको ऑब्जेक्टिफाई करना है, उसको बाहर आपको किसी तरह मीन्स बाय हुक और क्रुक आपको उसको बाहर ही प्रोड्यूस ही करना है किसी तरह, which is not, according to Vincent Thomas and many other aestheticians, it is not the case. And hence following are the features of skill. स्किल क्या है, स्किल की परिभाषा क्या है, क्या क्या फीचर्स हैं, क्या क्या कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स हैं. These are few of the we may why skill is a possession, it is a specialization, and it is a special capacity. Secondly, it is a form of an accomplishment. It is like he is a very accomplished plumber. ये बहुत अच्छे से प्लम्बिंग का काम करते हैं. It is like an accomplishment abilities. For instance, what is a natural ability? Breathing is a natural ability. To get impregnated is a natural ability. But when I convert breathing system into pranayama, I am not only restricting it to natural ability. I am adding something more to it. I am adding meaning to this entire breathing process. But breathing is natural ability, and natural abilities are to be seen, visualized in the context of creativity. And certainly, skills can be strengthened by a routine, by practicing repeatedly. So the question now is, if creativity is a non-routine thing, is it a flash? Is it a moment of inspiration? Is it a sudden illumination? Is it a miracle, or is it a mystical? Does it contain any mystical content in nature? Is it a natural capacity, innately pre-given? Can it be learned? These are the questions which bother us as students of states that this is a sudden illumination, a manifest sign of long unconscious prior work. There are schools of thought which consider that एक सिस्टम में है, ये ऐसा नहीं है कि अचानक ही कुछ होता है, बहुत लंबे अरसे से कुछ चली आ रही चीज है और उसमें आपके एकदम से ये मैनिफेस्ट होती है. Secondly, Mozart, Austrian composer, who writes that his best musical ideas, whence and how they came, I know not, nor I can force them. ना मैं इनको आइडियाज को फोर्स कर सकता हूं और मुझे पता भी नहीं कब और कैसे मुझे ये अपीयर हुए. And third, German physicist Helmholtz reports that his ideas arrive suddenly without any effort on his part, just like an inspiration. German mathematician Gauss, while referring to an arithmetical theorem, which he had been trying to prove since many months and he was unsuccessful, he says that finally 2 days ago, it is days ago, I succeeded not on account of my painful efforts, but by the grace of God. I mean, it gets so mystical that you have to bring in the concept of God in order to explain creative element in your research, in your ventures. Like a sudden flash of lightning, the riddle was solved. Picasso, Spanish painter, he also has to say, when he was being asked as to what creativity, he says, I don't know. And if I had known, I wouldn't tell. Now, the problem is the concept of creativity has too much to it. And when we come to explain it, for example, historically, it is believed that creativity must have at least two to three elements or characteristics or features. What is it? Novelty, newness, and also it must contain valuable. Otherwise, all nonsense stuff is also new, but it is not value carry any meaning. They are meaningless, they are valueless, and hence, in order to be creative, there must be some newness to the idea, but it also must be intelligible. It must also be functional. It also must have some familiarity. ये नहीं होना चाहिए कि बिल्कुल ही कुछ ऐसी चीज पकड़ा दी क्रिएटिविटी के नाम पे जिसकी आप सेंस ही ना बना सको. लेकिन हर चीज इंटेलिजिबल जो है वो क्रिएटिव हो ये जरूरी नहीं है. इंटेलिजिबल होना जो है वो क्रिएटिविटी का या न्यूनेस का लक्षण हम नहीं मान सकते. सो what does it mean to be new? New is equivalent. New would also be an equivalent of intelligible, recognizable, and familiar. But recognizable, familiar would also ring the bell of repeatability. क्योंकि जो familiar चीज है उसको आप repeat भी कर सकते हैं. So it is not an essential feature कि हाँ जो creative होगा उसमें familiar element जरूरी होगा, intelligible element जरूरी होगा. It asks for certain kind of an effort to reach up to the mark. And of course, another element which is very essential to while we define creativity is serendipity. Serendipity is like coming off a surprise. So an extra feature of creative act. Coming on to another part, the term we often as students of philosophy use the term cogito, which is again it means to shake things together, to shake ideas together. So when we talk of creativity in arts and creativity in science, how people from science would try to explore this idea of creativity is also interesting here. It combines, it reshuffles, it relates already existing separate ideas, facts, frames of perception. This act is said to be an act of cross-fertilization or self-fertilization or by association. As Arthur Koestler, this is the term that I've borrowed from Arthur Koestler in his article, Three Domains of Creativity. And orderly thinking is always controlled by rules. For example, if I start playing a game out here and I say, let's say the opposite, name the opposite. I say black, you'll certainly say white, right? But if I change the game, I'm also changing the rules of the game. Black, synonym. Let's play synonyms. Name the synonym. If I say black, you will say night, dark, shadow, something of the synonyms. Now, this is a game which is following the rules. We are aware of the rules of the game. And hence, we are in a boundary whereby we are following rules and hence the game is being played. But think of a play which is a free play, whereby you have no rules. For example, rugby was discovered, or I don't know what would we say, discovered rather than I would say invented. Rugby was invented by flouting a rule of football. You can't have rules to it. Rather, association, and we do have this. Einstein says that it is the combinatory play. Combinatory play means combination करना जो है ये बहुत जरूरी है. or association seems to be the essential feature in productive thought. And I've already given the example of rugby. We also have examples, plenty of examples. Motion of tide, motion of, अब इसको अगर हम समस्या बना लें भारतीय कि भारतीय में परिप्रेक्ष्य में अगर देखें हम, तो हमारे पास चंद्र ग्रहण, सूर्य ग्रहण, हमें ये मालूम है कि जो पूर्णमासी पे टाइड्स जो हैं, ओशन की टाइड्स जो हैं वो बढ़ती हैं. It is not in that context that I am referring. It is only from the philosophical, purely analytical point of view that I am trying to narrate, that we all knew, humanity since time immemorial knew that yes, tides and moon waxing and waning of moon, phases of moon, and high and low tides, they were two separate events. They were completely separate events. But who was the one who could unite the two separate events and relate कि हाँ tides बढ़ती हैं जैसे जैसे moon जो है बढ़ता है. So this is one of the creative ideas in science. It is considered to be one of the creative ideas in science. And hence the history of science, if we see, is a history of marriages between ideas which were previously strangers, completely strangers. For example, magnets. Magnets were either used, it was used only for two purposes, either for navigation or to attract estranged wife towards her husband. So it was, it is a documented thing. It is not a concocted thing. I can produce the reference also. And similarly, amber was another stone which अगर आप उसको rub करेंगे तो it will attract flimsy objects towards it. So now there is a magnet, and there is a magnet and an amber. Amber के लिए ग्रीक शब्द जो प्रयोग होता है वो है इलेक्ट्रॉन. अब इलेक्ट्रिकल जैसे हम बोलते हैं मैग्नेटिज्म है ना, इलेक्ट्रोमैग्नेटिज्म की जो हम बात करते हैं, ये कहाँ से आया? By combining these two ideas, right? And who was the one who actually could see the connection between electricity and magnetism? It was Hans Christian, who discovered the electric in 1830s, I believe, 1820 or 1830, not remembering the time exactly. And electric current, he discovered that electric current flowing through a wire could deflect the compass needle. And we also see Pythagoras, who combined arithmetic with geometry. We also find Einstein, who combined the ideas or unified the ideas of energy and matter. And we also have a story, very interesting story, very quickly I'll just narrate it. Charles Goodyear in 1839. He is said to discover this vulcanization of rubber. It is believed that he was under his जहाँ से उसने किराया कर्जा लिया था उसके जेल में उसको रहना पड़ा. And while he was under this prison, he developed this vulcanization of rubber. By trying, even it is believed that he tried cheese, he tried butter to vulcanize the rubber. चार्ल्स गुडियर, आप लोगों ने जरूर नाम सुना होगा. गुडियर नामक टायर्स आया करते थे बहुत पहले, अभी भी शायद होते होंगे, पर गुडियर ये टायर्स जो हैं उसी के नाम से हैं, चार्ल्स गुडियर के नाम से. एंड इट इज बिलीव दैट he continued testing. But this methodology is trial and error method कि क्या काम करेगा. But this is, you can't say that hit and trial method is creative method. It is only hit and trial. All sciences perform hit and trial method. Not only this, pick up another example. For example, if you rip apart all the clothes of a person and paint him black and white and in all colors and धकेल दो उसको एक कमरे में और dark lights, बिल्कुल dark कर दो कमरे को, lights off कर दो. Now he'll be, in order to move out of the room, he'll be thrashing himself to the walls. And finally, when you switch on the lights, you'll find the room painted. Now, can we say that yes, it is a creative act? Can we say that it has got something to do with art? No, we can't. Uh, there are certain prerequisites for an artwork to be an artwork. So let me also very quickly just briefly mention uh, that there are, with regard to creativity, there are two ideas: P creativity and H creativity. And the reference that I have is for Margaret Bowden, who says that there are, the peak creativity is the creativity when the person, in the time history of his life, he or she realizes the idea first time. That is the P creativity. And his H creativity represents history, that the idea has been existing in the history forever, but we realize it sometimes when we grow up, with phases of lives, with different stages of life, we get to understand. So that is how P creativity and H creativity is, that ideas are floating across the history and time forever. But we, as we grow, as we mature, as we sustain ourselves through difficult times, we get to realize ideas which are already there. So very quickly, I also wish to bring it to your notice a very interesting reactions to these, the creative act. What kind of possible reactions that we can have into a creative act? So the first reaction is said to be, uh, it is like a eureka cry. Arthur Koestler would name these three reactions as aha reaction, haha reaction, and aha. The first is, uh, जिसे हम बोलते हैं, जैसे वाह वाह का रिएक्शन है, that is, you say aha reactions means, oh, wonderful, this is the expression. For example, you are playing a puzzle and all of a sudden you get to see that all the bits of that puzzle are अचानक से जैसे सारी चीज सेटल हो गई, पजल सॉल्व हो गई. द रिएक्शन इज यूरेका क्राई. इट इज एन इक्विवेलेंट ऑफ यूरेका क्राई, दैट यू गेट टू सी, oh, it's solved, it's done, it's complete. Now this expression is known as the creative it is a response to a creative situation, but the name for it is aha creation. Wonderful, this is excellent. Second, the response to a creative act is, it is known as ha-ha creation. The ha-ha creation is certainly a laughing reaction to a situation. And for this, the humorist deliberately chooses discordant codes of behavior. And he tries to expose the internal incongruities of behavior. Let's take up an example. I have a story to narrate here. That there is a nobleman who, comes back home, and finds his wife with the bishop. And now this bishop, since the nobleman finds it very disturbing, but he holds himself and goes to the window of the room, and then he starts waving and blessing the people, those who were walking down the street. Now the wife gets very upset, and wife talks to the nobleman, and then, what are you doing? Why this making so embarrassing? So this nobleman responds to his wife that when bishop is performing my function, it is my duty to perform bishop's function, like blessing people, giving them, तो अब वहां पर वो स्थिति क्या है कि दो डिस्कॉर्डियंट बिहेवियर जो है, उनको आपने आमने सामने कोलाइड किया, एंड दैट इज हाउ द हा रिएक्शन कम्स आउट. इट इज इक्वली एन a creative response. It is a response to a creative situation, which is which can be held in some form of esteem. And third is, of course, we can also say that this haha situation is some malice. There is a malice of the jester, I would say. And precisely this haha reaction indicates the collision of the bi-associated context and aha reaction indicates their fusion, and aha reaction is the juxtaposition of things. For example, आह में अगर हम इस चीज को समझें, आह is a reaction whereby you breathe slowly, you sob, you go slow, and hence you are able to make sense of it through weeping, through sobs, through slowing down your process, through submission. And hence, these three reactions are very, very significant. And I also wish to say that to conclude, I would say that the concept of creativity is to be understood in terms of originality, newness, novelty, irreducibility, non repetitive, functional, and surprising activity. So far, self transcendence is concerned during the process of creativity and artistic experience is concerned, which is termed sometimes as oceanic or de-individualized self. K.C. Pandey's book refers to it as de-individualized self or state. It is not a self-assertive state. Rather, it is a state of merger, quiescence. The self-transcending emotions cannot be understood in terms of voluntary actions. It is rather a passive act. It is rather a submissive act. It is rather a submission on the part of the creator to a higher order, to a higher call of the uh, conscience. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I assume that I have not taken much of your time. Thank you.
थैंक यू मैम. आपने जो है आज कला और उसके रचनात्मक पहलू और उसकी काव्य परंपरा पे बहुत अच्छे व्याख्यान, सभी पहलुओं को आपने कहा, और उसके जो दार्शनिक पक्ष था उस पर भी आपने ये बात रखी, अपने विचार रखे, इसलिए आपको बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. और मैं अब डायस पे उपस्थित सभी सम्मानित लोगों से मैं अनुरोध करूंगा कि इसमें कुछ सजेशन या कुछ प्रश्न हो तो प्लीज. जी जी जी, नमस्ते नमस्ते
नमस्ते नमस्ते सभी को मेरा नमस्कार. Thank you very much, Dr. Shivani, for bringing out that neglected theme of Indian the philosophy teaching in India. Many times we have talked about doing something on aesthetics, but that could not be done. You have initiated, and thanks to Dr. Jayashankar Singh's motivation also, and to bring aesthetics in the mainstream of Indian philosophical teaching and thought. Thank you very much. Now I have got, though I am not a student of aesthetics, I must very much clarify, but I have got some, I need some clarifications. First of all, is film an art form or a craft or skill? How would you treat films of today? Within Natya Shastra or beyond that? One thing, because we have got a very commercial element nowadays, utilitarian element in that. Second question is related to, when you say art transforms self, what does it mean? Art transforms the creator self, or those who are the spectator self, or the those who take that art form, they just consume that. That is not a better word. So does art transform self of the creator or the self of the observer also? And can it transform in that sense the society also? There is a Marxist framework there also. So how would you respond to that? Another question, I would like, not a question, but a query. How would you distinguish between the creativity in art and creativity in science? You have talked about the both. Can the creativity in science be treated different? Because as I have read the making of the invention of the benzene ring of Kekulé, that is in chemistry, that he got this idea in his dream. But he was working on it for the past many years. So Russell would say that you just think, and reach at the ultimate and then leave it. And sometimes suddenly some spark will come out. So how this will you correlate with the artistic creativity, the scientific creativity? And the last question would be, I think this is very difficult for me also, how would you treat cultural creativity? Mixing, bringing out something new in culture, is that possible? Creativity in culture possible or not? Thank you.
Okay. Please, madam.
हाँ जी, आपके 4 प्रश्न हैं. Last वाले का मैं थोड़ा I'll take some time to respond. But yes, the first one is that whether films are to be considered as part of Natya Shastra or not. Is it a part? Is it a skill or is it creativity? So technically, if we perceive this problem of films, I would say it is more of a skill, because the writer, the screenplay is has got something to do. It might have some elements of creativity, but so far execution of the theme is concerned, I would say it is still a skill and a craft. Second, art transforms the creator self or the spectator self. That was your question. It transforms both. It is not that it is only for the the creator who's writing or who's producing or who's bringing in emerging with the art product will be transformed. It is also for the others also, but the intensity could be different. The intensity could be a different question altogether. Third, that how do we differentiate between art in science and art in creativity in art and creativity in science? It is believed that creativity is a leap into the dark. It is actually a plunge. So, creativity, be it in science or in art, it is always a jump, and you come to conclusions which you are not aware of. And I've already in my presentation given few references of scientists also, mathematicians also, whereby riddles, they claim that riddles were solved not because because of their own effort, but by grace of God. Now this is debatable, I understand, but still we cannot demean and minimize the uh, import of the quotations, statements that they have made. So I believe that yes, in science and in art, creativity does point out or refers to an open element. It is I will go by the statement that yes, creativity is a leap into the dark. It is just like faith. Faith is also something you have to believe. So, but it is not all that compulsion, I would say. And fourthly, your question, cultural creativity or creativity in culture. I have not exactly understood your question with regard to this. That what kind of, I mean, yes, we do get into interaction. We do have interaction with different cultures, but will it make us creative in the sense, in the spirit that I have been maintaining? I am doubtful. It won't. Why? Because there is an instinctive, जिसे हम बोलते हैं इंस्टिंक्टिव भी होता है कुछ, तो वो क्रिएटिव एलिमेंट जो है हमेशा इंस्टिंक्टिव होगा. उसको आप नर्चर कर सकते हो, कल्टीवेट कर सकते हो, पॉलिश कर सकते हो, उसको रिफाइन कर सकते हो, बट दैट इंस्टिंक्टिव एलिमेंट हैज टू बी देयर. ये मेरा आपके प्रश्न.
जी जी जी,
You
धन्यवाद.
missed the question of art and society relationship.
सर,
Art and society. हाँ, क्या था? What was it? I think I wrote 4 questions. What was the fourth question? Art and society का क्या question था? Sorry.
Can art be a purpose of changing the society?
Oh yes, of course. Why not? आप ये देखिए कि भारतीय दर्शन में जब हम ये बात करते हैं कि नाट्य शास्त्र लिखा गया, तो वो भरत के पास जाने का पर्पस देवताओं का यही था कि वो कहते ये आपके जो इतने तिकड़म वाले जो दर्शन है हमें नहीं समझ आते, आप कुछ ऐसी रचना कीजिए जो साधारण व्यक्ति को समझ आए, हम आम बुद्धि वालों को समझ आए, तभी नाट्य शास्त्र की रचना की गई।
जी जी।
का पर्पस यही था कि कांता सम्मित है ना, कांता सम्मित उपदेश माना जाता है ना इसको, कि इस तरह की भाषा उसमें यूज की जाए जिससे प्रभाव इमीडिएटली पड़े, वो प्रभाव डालने के लिए ही। और आप देखिए कि कोई भी ऐसा नाटक संस्कृत में नहीं लिखा गया या कोई भी ऐसा ग्रंथ आप संस्कृत का उठाकर देखें जिसमें भरत वाक्य ना हो और जिसमें मंगलाचरण ना हो। वो मंगलाचरण में पहले जो डिविनिटी है उसको इन्वोक करते हैं और भरत वाक्य में ये उपदेश दिया जाता है कि भाई जाकर राम की तरह काम करना है, रावण की तरह काम नहीं करना है। तो समाज तो सबसे पहले, समाज तो सबसे पहले।
थैंक यू वेरी मच डॉक्टर
प्रोफेसर पनीर सेल्वम सर कुछ पूछना चाहते हैं। सर प्लीज, प्रोफेसर पनीर सेल्वम सर।
Thank you, Professor Shivani ji, for your very nice and excellent presentation. And it is always a pleasure to listen to you. And you made it very clear how the self-transcendence and also self-transformation takes place in the field of arts. And thank you for highlighting the notion of creativity, especially when you made a reference to the H creativity. It is something remarkable because something is already implicit, and the duty or the aim of the sculptor or the painter is to bring out what is already available. A very, very beautiful lecture, Shivani ji. Once again, I thank you. But I have some observations for which I need your kind suggestions or clarification. First of all, in the contemporary aesthetics, especially I'm referring to the writings of Gadamer and then Heidegger and others, wherein it has been pointed out that there is an element of interpretation which is involved in art, which means art cannot be discussed as a mere art. The role of the observer is something very much important because it is he who gives a new dimension to the art, which perhaps sometimes is not seen by the painter or the sculptor himself. So ultimately, it is the participant or it is the observer who brings a new dimension of the art or a painting which is not visible or which is not properly seen due to various reasons by the author himself. So, what I would like to say here, Shivani ji, is that there is always an element of interpretation which we cannot avoid. This means that a piece of art can be viewed from different angles. So, some new meaning is emerging at each and every time, and this is something which is valuable to the artwork. And here I would like to quote Gadamer, who very beautiful is a well-known book, essays on beauty and other essays, wherein he talks about how there is how aesthetic has to be dissolved in hermeneutic, which means each and every art or every piece of art must give some new idea or it must give an element of interpretation. This is one point which I would like to tell. And secondly, this role of interpretation is something very important because the interpreter gives some new meaning. I give one example from Heidegger. Heidegger just interprets the pair of shoes of Van Gogh. No, Van Gogh painted a pair of shoes, but now Heidegger tries to interpret that in his well-known work, The Origin of Work of Art, wherein he says that this should not be viewed as mere pair of shoes, but the peasant or the lady who has toiled all her life from the morning till evening in the field. So this is how the interpreter gives a new dimension to this art. So what I'm trying to say is, how do you understand the role of the interpreter? And
Yeah.
another thing, Shivani ji, is that once the art is produced, or once the painting is done, or once the cinema is done, the director or the painter or the sculptor has no role to play into the artwork or in the painting work. Then you cannot say that this is my painting, this has to be interpreted. Now, take Picasso's artwork, for example. Nobody can say that this is a way by which we can understand it, which means we take the liberty. We means the participants or the listeners or the viewers take the liberty in interpreting. So, what I'm trying to say is, there is something new emerging at each and every period when we look at the art. And finally, you are very beautifully brought out the self transcending aspect. But in the beginning, you have made a reference to self transformation also. I think this is something very, very important, and thank you for highlighting this. This self transformation not only takes place at the level of the painter or the one who is doing this, but it also makes a social transformation. Now, for example, when I see a drama, when I see a epic like Ramayana or Mahabharata on the stage, then I become a participant of that.
Yeah.
Then I know the values which I have to inculcate it. So it takes me to a different realm altogether. Just I am not a mere viewer of something, but I am also participating in that. That means it transforms the entire society. So one cannot say that it stops with mere self-transformation. It transforms the entire society. And also, finally, the subjective element is very much highlighted. In fact, our member secretary, Professor Sachidanand also pointed out how this subjective element plays an important role. But it is not mere subjective element, but once the art is produced, then the objective element, or what I as a participant or I as an outsider can draw from this art. So it becomes objective. So once it is subjective and now it is objective. These are some of my observations, Professor.
No, thank you. Thank you.
I really enjoyed.
No. I enjoyed your questions and observations, sir. Thank you so much. And I completely agree with your first point that yes, that role of interpretation will always be significant and meaningful. And it is rather the perspective of the spectator and the audience that will make sense of the work of art. And that is why art is always visualized from two angles, from two perspectives: art as a process and art as a product. But creativity becomes more relevant and significant from the perspective of art as a process. Why? Because it is always, within the internal leap that the artist or the creator takes. That is one thing. Thank you so much.
सर गोखले सर
हाँ
सर मेरी स्टाफ को अच्छा जी
आपका भाषण बहुत अच्छा रहा। मेरा भी विषय सौंदर्य शास्त्र यही है
जी।
मैं मानता हूँ कि जो क्रिएटिविटी होती है वो जनरली हम एक्टिव और पैसिव वॉइस ऐसे दो में विभाजन करते हैं, पर आर्टिस्टिक क्रिएटिविटी जो होती है उसमें हम मीडियम बन जाते हैं, और मीडियम होने के कारण वी आर नॉट एज एक्टिव एज वी आर एक्टिव इन अदर फील्ड्स ऑफ आवर लाइफ। हम कहते हैं हमसे हो गया, हमने किया, ऐसे नहीं कहते। क्रिएटिविटी में ये जो होना है, हमसे होना है, वी बिकम द मीडियम, एंड फॉर दैट वी हैव टू आई वोंट फॉर दैट ट्रांसलेटिंग वर्ड, बट आई विल प्रेफर आई आइडेंटिफाई माई सेल्फ विद द एस्थेटिक वैल्यू, नेमली अभिरुचि और कला भाव, कलात्मक मूल्य, और दूसरा है मीडियम आर्टिफैक्ट जिसको हम कहते हैं। जो विषय हमने लिया है, मान लीजिए कोई राग गाने के लिए लिया है या कोई कथा कहने के लिए लिखने के लिए बैठे हैं, तो उस विषय के साथ जब हम आइडेंटिफाई कर लेते हैं, माने हमारे लौकिक अहम को भूल के उसी में मर्ज हो जाते हैं, तब वो जो विषय है वो अपने आप कहने लगता है कि हम क्या करें। उसको हिंदी में उपज कहते हैं। उपज उसमें से निकलना, और तब वर्क ऑफ आर्ट होता है। माने वर्क ऑफ आर्ट और क्या आर्टिफैक्ट, इसमें अगर हम फर्क करते हैं तो आर्टिफैक्ट से वर्क ऑफ आर्ट होने का यह जो एक प्रोसेस है, आइडेंटिफाइंग विद द आर्टिफैक्ट एंड डूइंग ओनली व्हाट द आर्टिफैक्ट वांट्स अस टू डू, तो ये एक प्रोसेस है। हमारे मराठी में B.S. मर्ढेकर करके एक बड़े पोएट हो गए, उन्होंने उनकी सौंदर्य विषय थियरी रखी है, उसमें ये कहते हैं कि हम आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं उस मीडियम के साथ, और एस्थेटिक वैल्यू ये एक अलग वैल्यू है। उसको ख्याल में रखते हुए जब कोई काम होता है तो वर्क ऑफ आर्ट बनता है। आपका भाषण बहुत अच्छा था, थैंक यू वेरी मच।
धन्यवाद।
Can I say something?
मैम रेखा जी।
Okay.
डॉक्टर रेखा नवले जी।
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak. And sorry, Pratibha, I raised my hand probably earlier. And thank you so much, Dr. Shivani Sharma, for that profound, yet lucid, yet so well structured. And actually, despite having been a student of aesthetics, so to say, for so many years, the way you have presented it's something which I have to learn a great deal from. The only thing that I was just wondering about the self transcendence and the self growth, so to say, or self transformation, that in both cases it will be like a self growth for both the artist as well as the receiver. And I was just wondering if we could use commune as a better word, commune between the Sahirdik spectator or the receiver and the artist. And this would be, in my understanding, and coming from your presentation, this would be more relevant if we give art an independent space, in the sense that it is more of a presentational thing rather than just a representation or mimetic, etc. And specifically, if I can bring in Sartarian kind of an approach, that if art is autonomous and not really related to the social transformation, but if it has to be related with the moral responsibility, as we have seen in the entire Indian discourse, then probably there will be a hierarchy, in the sense that first we'll raise up ourselves in the sattvic way and then identify. So I was just wondering if you could address those concerns or observations.
I think I agree to what you have to suggest. I can develop this idea maybe in my next attempt. I mean, self-transformation and self-transcendence as a part of growth itself, and commune is the word that you have suggesting.
Right.
I think I can adopt it in my future attempts, of course. Thank you for the input.
डॉक्टर प्रतिभा शर्मा जी मैम।
Yeah. Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity, and thank you and congratulations, Dr. Shivani Sharma, for such an illuminating and thought-provoking talk. In fact, my thoughts were provoked. I hardly know anything about aesthetics, but as you were talking about it, I came to know more and more. And in fact, there's hardly any possibility of debate and criticism in your talk, because you have taken it up from different perspectives and truly in a philosophical sense. But one of your major concerns in your talk was about transformation and transcendence. What I could gather during the talk only that these two can go hand in hand. As we transform, we transcend, and we finally reach up a state, a culminating point where we find ourselves above ourselves. That is the state of transcendence, and that at that point of time we find ourselves to be transformed, whether it is an artist or an audience. This is one of my observation, and I think this happens at the culmination point only, when the artist and the spectator or the audience become one. There is complete act of unification. It happens at that point of time only, which is a very which is not so common in visualizing art, in experiencing art. This point, culmination point, does not come very often. It hardly comes
Hello.
when actually the artist and the spectator becomes one. And one more thing which you were talking about in answering Dr. Alok Tandon, that film is not is a skill, you answered. But why do we have tears in our eyes when we watch a movie? Means, why do we feel the pain of the artist? We have that culminating point, so we should call films also as an art form and not merely a skill. These are some of my observations. Thank you very much for this intelligent
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pratibha.
discourse. Thank you.
It's always great to have you on board. Thank you. To your first query, that self-transformation and self-transcendence, of course, rather, it is not a communion between the artist and the spectator. Rather, it is a communion between, as the word was given to me, I would rather use it. It is rather a confirmation of the artwork, between a communion between the artwork and the spectator, it could be. And secondly, that the point that was with regard to why films are, why I wish to place them as a skill. But I also responded to Alokji that the screenplay can be said to be creative, but not the other things, because you already know the end where you wish to lead, right? And that is why you not only take one take, you take number of takes, you edit, you re-edit. So this editing part does not happen in creative act. Rather, I quoted Russell, who says in his essay that it is always the first writing that I wish to bring whatsoever is in my mind, but the first writing is always the preferable. Why? Because it is the original. Originality is one of the major criterias of creative act. So films, I don't deny that they can have artistic element, but we are rather talking of creative element. So creativity is something very spontaneous. It has to be something very, it has to have some originality to it, and it cannot be repetitive. It is a non-repetitive event. Whereas in films, we have a complete procedure that is being followed, whereby we have the best foot forward. Whereas it is not essential in a creative act. A creative act will have its whatsoever is there, it is there. It is as it is. You have no refining, you have no second moment to it. You have no refining moment to it. That is the problem.
थैंक यू मैडम.
Thank you, Dr. Shivani.
बड़ा अच्छा लगा आज के ये सब्जेक्ट पे बहुत से हमारे प्रतिभागियों ने अच्छे क्वेश्चन उठाए, अच्छे प्रश्न उठे थे. डॉक्टर शिवानी मैडम ने बहुत अच्छे ढंग से उसका जवाब भी दिया, सजेशन भी मिले, उसके लिए भी सभी लोगों को धन्यवाद. अब मैं इस कार्यक्रम में परिषद के सदस्य, परिषद के अध्यक्ष प्रोफेसर आर.सी. सिन्हा सर से अध्यक्षीय उद्बोधन के लिए आमंत्रित करता हूँ. प्रोफेसर आर.सी. सिन्हा सर.
First of all, I offer my namaskar to each and everyone on the screen and off the screen. I'm sorry because I have to leave for urgent meeting in. Actually, I am a member of the governing body of the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla, and there was an urgent meeting. It was urgent one, so I left you. Though I dislike. I like to be part of the academic deliberation rather than any sort of executive or administrative meetings. My preference is certainly academic one. But I could not, I heard some of the portions of the deliberations, and especially when Dr. Shivani started the speaking on heart and transcendence. There are three, as I usually say, that philosophizing is certainly a matter of conceptualizing. So I think there are three concepts on which Dr. Shivani has thrown ample light. The concept of the art and the concept of the transcendence, and certainly the idea of the creativity. So if we analyze these three concepts and relate to each other, that is, relating one concept to the other is a creative attempt. Creativity does not lie in creating a new thing only. Newness, novelty is certainly remarkable component of creativity. But if you relate one concept to the other, in philosophical perspective, creativity is not only a system building. Actually, in our classical point of view, relating to philosophy, the philosopher is a creative when he builds a school of philosophy. But here the context is different. Art, transcendence, and creativity. So the one concept can be identified, transformation and transcendence. Certainly not. Transformation is a different thing, and transcendence is a different one. Transformation is within as well as in society. So naturally, transformation has got empirical connotation. While transcendence, I may be wrong. I don't, because I have not heard the entire deliberation. But whatever I understand, and this is just my reflections. And Pratibhaji, I may be wrong. But I think that transcendence has got certainly a metaphysical connotation. So if we transcend, and here the creativity, art and creativity, they go hand in hand, because art is cannot be art if it is not creative. So transcendence can be understood in a when we create some object. Certainly we just transcend ourselves, not in a metaphysical sense. If we identify ourselves with the nature, we transcend ourselves. Tagore, when he talks about the aesthetics and enjoying the beauty of the nature, that is also a sort of transcending from individual limitations. When we are just watching the sunset or the sunrise, there also we transcend. And that enjoying consciousness leads to transcendence, but that is not the metaphysical aspect. I think Dr. Shivani, when she talks about transcendence. I don't know, because she does not mean transcendence in the metaphysical sense, because art is concerned with the aesthetic aspect of the existence. And here I would like to mention one book by Benedetto Croce, his wonderful book, Aesthetics. So that in that book, he Croce tries to understand art not in a transcendental sense. He talks about intuitive experience. Intuitive experience, because normally when we talk about intuition, we talk about aprokshanubhuti. That is the practice of the philosophers, that whenever we talk about intuition, certainly we go beyond the empirical existence, and intuitive experience is identified with the aprokshanubhuti, and realizing the ultimate reality that through intuitive experience. But here, when we talk about art and creativity, so certainly not on a transcendental level, but I understand that art is always on empirical level. Even the painter, when he paints something, he transcends himself. So the subjectivity, the artist is not engrossed in the subjectivity, rather he transcends his or her subjectivity. That is a sort of extension of the self. When a painter paints something, his painting gets objectivity. He is not confined to his expression. Expression is always expression goes beyond. Though it is a self-expression, but it is not. It does not suffer from subjectivity. And certainly, Dr. Shivani in the beginning talked about the universal aspect of the art, universal aspect. Creativity is also, though it is conditioned by cultural atmosphere, it is conditioned. Any sort of creativity, it is not fully beyond the cultural setting of the individual or the cultural setting of the country. Even if we write scriptures, so certainly we are conditioned because of the cultural setting. If we talk about the Vedas or Upanishad, they are very creative writings, but it has got Indianness, and it is conditioned by the Indian cultural setup. And Bible is also a creative scripture, but it is also conditioned by the prevailing situation. So here, subjectivity and individuality. Subjectivity has got a different connotation. So art is an expression of subjectivity, certainly, but it is extended. It goes beyond individuality, or it goes it does not suffer the subjectivity. Rather, it assumes the universality, because others also can share. Objectivity means if somebody shares that, then it becomes subjective. So um, I I must congratulate Dr. Shivani. She expressed whatever I heard very in a lucid and very in a very good English. Must congratulate, and conceptual clarity too is there. Uh, so whatever I can gather and whatever I can imagine, I placed before you, and I must warmly congratulate Dr. Shivani and those who have participated. With these words, I offer my namaskar
Thank you. Thank you.
and welcome, always welcome.
धन्यवाद सर।
To Jaishankar ji.
जी धन्यवाद सर। अब हमारे कार्यक्रम की ये अंतिम रूप में चल रहा है, जिसमें मैं प्रोफेसर शिवानी शर्मा जी को बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देता हूँ। उन्होंने परिषद के इस मंच पे आकर के अपने व्याख्यान से हम सभी लोग और जितने भी आभासी पटल पे हैं सभी लोगों को इसका एक रसास्वाद कराया। इसके लिए मैं डॉक्टर शिवानी शर्मा जी को बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देता हूँ। इस कार्यक्रम में हमारे प्रोफेसर पनीर सेल्वम जी, जिन्होंने क्वेरी, क्वेश्चन, सजेशन सब कुछ दिए, उनके लिए भी मैं सर को भी मैं आभार प्रकट करता हूँ सर के प्रति।
जी मेरा भी नमस्कार। मेरा भी नमस्कार।
प्रोफेसर कृष्णैया जी के प्रति भी मैं आभार
कृष्णैया
तरफ से। और इस कार्यक्रम में गोखले जी भी प्रश्न किए थे, उनको भी मैं आभासी पटल पे हमारे उपस्थित थे, सर को भी मैं के साथ अवगत करता हूँ। कार्यक्रम में प्रशांत शुक्ला लखनऊ यूनिवर्सिटी से, रनंजय सिंह बनारस यूनिवर्सिटी से, प्रोफेसर अनिता तिवारी जी भी थी इस कार्यक्रम में, अमरजीत सिंह थे, प्रोफेसर नमिता निम्बालकर जी बॉम्बे से थी, मैं मैडम को भी आभार प्रकट करता हूँ। डॉक्टर हरप्रिया बेहरा लाल बहादुर शास्त्री संस्कृत विश्वविद्यालय दिल्ली से थी, प्रोफेसर लक्ष्मीकांत पादी जी जो हम लोग के हर कार्यक्रम में आते हैं, उनके लिए भी सर को मैं करूँ। डॉक्टर राजकुमार चौबे, डॉक्टर सतीश तिवारी जम्मू से, डॉक्टर मनोज मिश्रा, डॉक्टर क्षमा तिवारी, डॉक्टर संजय सिंह, डॉक्टर रश्मि, डॉक्टर आभा त्रिपाठी इलाहाबाद से, सौरभ अवाना जी, डॉक्टर प्रतिभा शर्मा जी नई दिल्ली से, उन्होंने भी अपने कुछ सजेशन उपस्थित किए, मैं सर को भी आभार प्रकट करता हूँ। डॉक्टर रेखा, डॉक्टर नवनीत, डॉक्टर विवेक पांडे जी अयोध्या से हैं, और आपको भी मैं इस आभासी पटल पे आप लोग आए और सभी लोगों को मैं एक बार परिषद की तरफ से आभार प्रकट करता हूँ। अंत में इस कार्यक्रम के हमारे अध्यक्ष प्रोफेसर आर.सी. सिन्हा सर, जिनके मार्गदर्शन में शैक्षिक कार्यक्रम हो रहा है। अभी हम लोग मथुरा में भी लाइफ टाइम अचीवमेंट अवार्ड प्रोफेसर एस.आर. भट्ट जी को सर के नेतृत्व में और प्रोफेसर सच्चिदानंद मिश्र मेंबर सेक्रेटरी के नेतृत्व में दिया गया। उसके बाद अभी हम लोग अक्षरधाम में साधु स्वामी अध्यक्ष दास जी को भी 2020 का लाइफ टाइम अचीवमेंट अवार्ड करके उनको भी दिया गया, और सर के नेतृत्व में ही आज ही हम सब लोग वापस आए हैं। और मैं प्रोफेसर सच्चिदानंद मिश्र जी को भी धन्यवाद देता हूँ, जो कि अपने इस व्यस्तम कार्यक्रम में हम लोग के बीच में आए, और उनको भी आभार करता हूँ। डॉक्टर पूजा व्यास, चूँकि कुछ कारणों से उनकी तबीयत स्वास्थ्य में है, इस नाते वो आज इस मंच में नहीं आ पाई हैं। मैं डॉक्टर पूजा व्यास को भी धन्यवाद देता हूँ। यह कार्यक्रम हमारा यूट्यूब चैनल पर भी लाइव प्रसारण हो रहा था, और आप लोगों को भी लिंक दिया गया, बाद में भी इस कार्यक्रम को आप लोग सुन सकते हैं। और इसी के साथ मैं एक बार पुनः परिषद की तरफ से आभासी पटल पर उपस्थित सभी लोगों को और अपने वक्ता महोदया को, मैं बीच में छूट गया, डॉक्टर आलोक टंडन जी, जो कि हम लोगों के एक तरीके से प्रश्न के गार्जियन हैं। मैं उनको बहुत बहुत आभार प्रकट करता हूँ कि सर हमारे हर कार्यक्रम में उपस्थित रहते हैं और अपने कोशिश करते हैं। अब एक बार पुनः मैं सभी लोगों को धन्यवाद देता हूँ और नमस्कार करता हूँ।
जी
Thank you everyone.
थैंक यू
थैंक यू, थैंक यू। मैं जयशंकर जी को भी थैंक यू देना चाहता हूँ, उन्होंने बहुत अच्छा संचालन किया। थैंक यू, थैंक यू।
अच्छा, नमस्ते।
नमस्ते।
सबको नमस्कार, बड़ा अच्छा तरीके